the Bookville. Okay, got it. You're welcome to the Bookville August Book Fair and the book session, where we'll be having conversations on 2 books. The first one is A Good Name by Yejide Kilanko, and the second one is Eric Ngalle by Eric Ngalle Charles. And they are here, and I am so excited, and I hope everyone else is excited to be here too. My name is B.I. Garrix, and I'm also known as the Roving Bookworm. I'm a blogger, I write poetry, and I'm a book lover, most importantly. I guess that's why I'm moderating this. I love books, I love talking about books, I love everything books, meeting authors, I'm trying to get into their heads. And I know that most people who are joining are like minds who also love books. So we'll get into it. First of all, I would like to welcome our authors, Yejide and Eric, for making our time to join the conversation and just be here for your fans, because that's who we are. And also thank everyone else who has taken out time to also join this book session, and I'm looking forward to it. So before we go further, I'll just say that let's have some ground rules. Please turn off your microphones so that we don't disrupt the session. And then in the course of the conversation, if you have questions, you can put them in the comments, and then would read them. If we still have some time towards the end, when we've taken all your questions, then maybe we may allow a few people to speak. Maybe they want to say something directly to the authors, then yeah, we'll do that. But we'll try to keep to time, so that I know that both authors are busy and they've taken out time to be here, so we wouldn't want to keep them for too long. So I would like to begin quickly by reading the bios of the 2 authors. I'll start with Yejide. They said ladies first, so I'll start with her bio, just in case you haven't read any of their books, or you have read the books but you don't know much about them. They would still speak about themselves a bit as a form of introduction, but I would like to do this because when I notice that when you have interviews with authors, they don't want to blow their trumpets. They don't want to say, I've done this and I've done that. So I think I'll do that part by reading their bios. So Yejide Kilanko is a writer of novels, short stories, and a poet. Kilanko's debut novel, Daughters Who Walk This Path, 2012, a Canadian national bestseller, was longlisted for the inaugural Etisalat Prize and the 2016 Nigeria Literature Prize. Her work includes a novella, Chasing Butterflies, published in 2015, and a children's picture book, There is an Elephant in My Wardrobe, published 2018. Her short fiction is included in the anthology New Orleans Review 2017, The African Literary Hustle. Yejide lives in Ontario, Canada, where she also practices as a therapist in children's mental health. So that's Yejide's bio. And then we have the bio for Eric Ngalle Charles. He's a Cameroonian writer, poet, playwright, and human rights activist based in Wales. He was awarded the Creative Wales Award 2017-2018 for his work on the topics of migration, trauma, and memory. In his autobiography, Eric Ngalle, One Man's Journey Crossing Continents from Africa to Europe, published in 2019, he recounts his journey to Europe, where he spent several years seeking refuge. He sits on the boards of Literature, Wales, and Aberystwyth. I know I'm not pronouncing this correctly. Arts Center Advisory Group and begins his PhD at King's College London in October 2021. So I guess he's started. He'll tell us more about it when he does an introduction. So those are the bios for the two authors, and I would like Yejide to say a few words before we start the conversation about the books, A Good Name, and the other book, Eric Ngalle. So Yejide.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having us, and thank you for joining us today. So I'm thinking words. So I think it was already mentioned I was born in Ibadan, Nigeria. I'm a very proud Nigerian. I've lived out of Nigeria now for 22 years, but I still feel like I still feel like that's still a big part of who I am. So my day work is as a social worker. I'm not doing counseling right now. I'm doing something else, but that's my day work. And yeah, I'm looking forward to the conversation. Like it's hard to just talk about yourself. So I don't know. So if people have questions for me, I'll be more than happy to answer them. But I'm looking forward to the conversation with Eric and Bai. So thank you.
All right, Eric, over to you.
Thank you, Bai. Thank you, Yejide, Amara. Bookville. No, this is the first time I'm talking in Port Harcourt. This is wonderful. Thank you very much for having me. Yes, my name is Eric Ngalle Charles. I am based in Cardiff. In fact, if I move my camera, you will see Cardiff City Stadium. So I'm just next door. We have discount tickets when the noisemakers come down from London when they play football here. So this is where I am. I've been living in Wales almost 22 years as well. You know, I went back to Cameroon for the first time in 2017, and my mom had completely forgotten what my name was. My mom called me Oscar, which is my father's name. But I'll tell you more as this conversation unfolds. So thank you very much for having me.
So thank you. The way I would like to moderate this conversation is because there are two authors. Usually you have one author and then you just focus on one author, but because there are two authors, this is also new to me. I'll try to navigate the conversation in a way that everyone is part of the conversation. So I'll start with Yejide first. I would like to say that I read A Good Name. I think we spoke earlier today, and I said that the book, wow, I read it in one sitting. I was captivated by this story. It felt familiar. You know, I don't know if it was because of the familiarity of the story, but also I also felt like it was well paced. It just had the right everything that I love in a story. It felt very real, very relatable, and I was able to really empathize with all parties, and I'm talking about the protagonists. So the first question I'll ask you, and I'll also ask Eric, although his book is a memoir, but you know, for you who wrote a fictional story, why was this story important for you to tell? That's the first question I have.
Okay. I think so. The journey for A Good Name started a long time ago. It took 10 years for that book to actually happen. So it started in 2010. I was still working on Daughters, my very first book. And I needed a break, like, you know, because Daughters is a very heavy topic, and domestic violence isn't easier, but I tend to like write on heavy things. And so I said, okay, 2010, that I wanted to write a book about, and at that time, there were many stories. So I always say A Good Name is like a pulled from the headlines plot. There were lots of Nigerian women, especially in the States at that time, who there were a lot of who were nurses, who were married to older men. And so that was how the story started. Because for me, what sparks an idea in my head is like, why was this happening? why, people were talking. It was very popular, like 2010, 2011, there were so many different stories. And writing for me is a way of processing my own thoughts. So if I have an idea about something, I'm like, okay, why, what could be behind this? And so that was what led to me writing the story and figuring out, okay, and that was why the book was set in the States, because at that time, that was where most of those stories were coming out from, and especially in Texas, because we have a huge Nigerian population living in Texas. And so that was what led to the story, in terms of why was it happening, and I'm really thankful that you said you were able to relate to all the characters, because I didn't want it to be like, I wanted people to be able to see that when we understand somebody's humanity, we may not agree with their actions, but we can see why they make certain decisions. And so that was a very deliberate, and those were very deliberate for me, that I wanted people to be able to understand, yes, I don't agree with this character's action, but I can see, I can recognize their humanity and see why they made those decisions. So that was what led to the book.
Oh, okay. I mean, when you say like at the time you started the book, I think that there was also a case of such a thing where a man who was married to a nurse, I can't even remember if she was a nurse, but recently, I think it was in 2020 or 2021, I can't remember, but it made the news, and he shot her, and then I can't remember if he shot himself, but we've had those things happen, especially in the US. Then another thing that struck me, I know that you say you thank God you said you're proudly Nigerian and you were born in Ibadan, but 90% of the characters were Igbo, and
Yes.
but it was so well represented. So what kind of research went into this? Because obviously, if I was going to write that book, I'm not Igbo, so I would have had to do a lot of research. So that was another thing that got me thinking, like, I know she's Yoruba, and I know that, from reading about you, what's online and what's available, I know that you have been living abroad for quite a while. So what kind of research went into this work?
Okay, so I knew that was going to be a question that would come up. And so she's a Yoruba woman and she wrote about Igbo people. And then I have to say that domestic violence is not an Igbo problem. It's a human problem, right? So I have to say, but I schooled in the East. I went to FGCC Onitsha. So from when I was 10 till I was 16, so I schooled in Onitsha. And so that was a big part of my life. And I still have very, very good friends who are Igbo people. And so a lot of my friends who I have kept in touch for, I went to Onitsha 86, we still keep in touch. So because I wanted to honor. I did not want to portray like, oh, this was an Igbo problem, and it's not, right? I wanted to honor that and respect that. And so I did talk to my friends, and there were people who had very helped me in terms of, making sure the spellings were right, making sure the culture was right. And so that was really important to me, that I honor that. But my years in Onitsha were a very big part of my life. They formed the woman I am today. And so that was my way of also honoring that as well.
Oh wow, that's so interesting to note, because it was so real. It was so Igbo, the culture, the names, the mannerisms. I could really get all that Igbo vibe in the story. So I was like, what, did she have friends? Did she have people she would, call or, have meetings with to get all this right? And so that was really interesting. So the next question I have before I go to the, will I say, hard part of it, what part of this book was fun for you to write? Because you said you wrote it for quite a while. It took you quite a while too.
Well, humor for me is how I deal. Yeah, it had to be, right? Humor is how I deal with heavy topics, right? So it was very important to me that every time I would find like little point, the way I call it is like exhaling, right? Because it's like you're like inhaling, like, oh, you're on the edge of your seat. You need some time to just like, just excel. And so I was always trying to find things. Let me see, that would be a fun. It would be the banter between Jovita and Eziafa. That was a fun, and it was also when Eziafa went home to visit his mom, and that interaction between them. I think I loved the interaction between Eziafa and his friends. Obikwelu in particular. Yeah, so the way for me, because I tend to write about heavy things, even with my children's books, right? Because I've written 2 children's books now. One is on anger management, one on anxiety. So I tend to write about heavy things, but I always find that when I put humor, it allows the reader to just catch a break, right? Because it's so heavy, you need to be able to excel. And so that's what I do when I'm writing, to just excel. Like, okay, it's okay. Then you can continue. And so because I don't think that it should be all pain. Then if it's all pain for the writer, it's all pain for the reader. And so, yeah, so it was very important to me that I had fun. I also had fun with it. So I'm hoping that, the readers, walked away with that, because life is not just a ball of pain. It's all different emotions, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, so while domestic violence was kind of like one of the major themes, or I would say the major theme, I think that there were other themes that were there that were also very important for me as a reader. For example, the pressures that come from home, the pressures from parents to be a certain way or do certain things. Why was what were you trying to say with with that, putting that in the story? Obviously, I mean, that was going to be a major part for the character, because I mean, something had to make him to come home to get married to someone, as opposed to finding a wife, in the US. So that for me was also a major theme. I would like to know your views about that, hear your views about that.
Yeah, so well, I'm the oldest child. I'm the first of 5, and so you can imagine that. I'm sorry, maybe someone should mute their the feedback so people can
Please,
hear.
can you mute, because I can't. Daniel, you need to mute your microphone. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So I'm the oldest of five children. And so you can imagine being the firstborn and first daughter and having all those expectations. So that was part of reflecting my own personal experiences, of where people have, expectations of you, and, you're meant to send this home, you're meant to do this, you're meant to visit and share. And so it's a lot of pressure. It's a lot of pressure on people who who live in diaspora, and especially when, if people at home have this expectation of you in terms of you have to send things home. And I know people who, because of that, they would just cut connections with people at home. They're like, I can't deal with this, right? They block people, they don't respond because it's too much. And I wanted to a way of shining the light, like, that pressure, it's not helping. It's not helping. It didn't help Eziafa. It didn't help Zena, that it places too much when you have all this expectation. But I also understand well, you have more than we do, so therefore you should share. I think they call it black tax, right? And the black tax is not even only peculiar to Nigeria, right? It's everywhere, right? People expect that, like if you're doing well, even we talk about even my African American friends, right? Like even if you make it out of the hood, right? People expect that you're meant to go back and do things, so it's that expectation, like you've had the privilege of making it out. Now you have the expectation, there's this expectation that you have to give back, and there's nothing wrong with giving back, but there has to be a balance. And when it gets to the point of where you're resentful and you're angry, and then it's not helpful. It's not helpful for the person, who's receiving or the person who's given. So that was the other piece that I wanted to talk about, because that was also personal in terms of people having expectations of me in terms of, oh, you have to, and not just family, friends, even neighbors, even people that you don't even know would send you a message and expect this from you. So yeah, so that was why I talked about that in the book.
Okay, I'll just hold for Yejide for now, and I would ask Eric. I'll go to Eric. If you have any more questions, I have more questions for you, Yejide, but I just want to take a break and let's hear from Eric. I loved reading your memoir, although it was so heavy that I had to take breaks. Like seriously, I was like, did this actually happen? It was like a movie for real. It was like I was watching a movie. So, but I loved, you know, what I got out of it, because I feel like you may know some things, you may have an idea about human trafficking and how, you know, people are basically deceived into traveling abroad and say they're going to school and things like that. I might have an idea, or I see, you know, we watch on TV how people go in boats and things like that through Libya and all that. And you have an idea, but reading your book, it was so vivid. It just gave me a clear picture of how this actually happens and how horrific it is. So the first question I have would be, why did you think that you had to tell this story after all that has happened? And, you know, you made it out. Thank God you're here and you're well and fine and we're seeing you. Many people haven't survived it. So why did you think it was important for you to go back to really document this and tell the world? Because I don't know, like I was just thinking about all the trauma and how you would have dealt with writing all that, putting that together.
Thank you very much, Bia. Once again, thank you very much, everyone. You know, I had to write that book. I had to tell that story. Because like you said, there were many things that happened. And the very fact that I made it out alive is a conversation that we can have. But when I came to Wales in July 1999, all I had were my memories. See? And you have people calling me and like, oh, I'm on this stage and tell you how you got to be here in Wales. Now I'm thinking, what part of my memories do you want? Shall I tell you how, as a 17-year-old boy, I left Cameroon at such haste? Should I tell you how the streets of Russia became my friends, or how I managed to come to Wales as a 64-year-old Zimbabwean? So what aspect, what part of my memory, what do you actually want? And so I started writing poetry, drip by drip, because imagine if I stood on the streets and start telling people about the things that you've read in that book. People have a panic attack. In fact, when that book came out in 2018, a white writer friend of mine said to me, you know, if a white author had written this book, they'll be winning the Pulitzer Awards and all of those things.
Yeah.
And then when my daughter read it, she said, Dad, if this were fiction, your character would have died. So this is it.
Definitely.
But I had to tell this story, not because of the thing that I went through. You see, I deliberately told it for 2 years and 2 months that I was in Russia. And I left it like that. Yeah. But for my mother's sake, I had to tell this story, because in telling this story, I was telling her story. You know, seeing one's mother cry is never a very good sign, because you begin to wonder, what should you do? So there is a thing that I wanted to do. I wanted to set my father's house on fire, for example. I was ready. I had a can of petrol in one hand, a box of matches in the other hand, gazing at my father's house with deadly intention. I mean, I was possessed by some sort of madness. But you see, my mom, one of the greatest gifts my mother gave us was the fact that she had a wonderful voice. So when I stood outside my father's house, getting ready to set it into flames, my mother started singing this song. So I stopped this action. I never set my father's house on fire. But as my luck will have it, I had an invitation letter to go to Bruges. And you know what happened? I never made it. To date, I've never been to Bruges. So yes, this story, not only for myself, but like Yejide said, this need that we have to try and swim across the Mediterranean, regardless of whether there are crocodiles in it or not. But going back home empty-handed, yeah.
Wow, I mean, like you said, your daughter said if this was fiction, the protagonist would have died. Like, seriously, there was a lot of, I'm Christian, so I was just like, God was just there, God was just there, even at the end when, I was just like, he's definitely good. I mean, I knew because you were going to be fine, but it was almost like reading fiction too. So another question is, what is the significance of the title? I feel like I know it. I just feel
we were playing around it with my first publisher, Richard David, for Parthian. And we were playing around this all kinds of names, and we just conclude that, you know what, this is an autobiography, this is a memoir, why don't we just use your name? I'm like, okay, this is like showing off, He goes, no, it isn't. And I'm glad we did. I'm glad we went with that name because there is that attraction. People will actually pick the book like, this is audacious. Why would you name your book with your name, But this is the attraction. And then you start reading it and you understand the raison d'etre why we went with that name. And I think, I don't know if any other name would have worked. So I'm glad. I'm glad we went with it, yeah.
The beauty about the beauty of speaking with authors about their books, because you write something and you think, or you name a book, or you write something from your own perspective or from different perspectives, and you think that this is the message I want to give people, but other people read it and they get something else from it, that they see it from another perspective. And this is my perspective of the title. At the end, you said you were in this country that gave perspective. I was like, oh, wow, this is so apt, because I felt like it was important for the book to be titled, I, Eric Ngalle. This is my interpretation of the title of the book, that, you were somebody else for a long time, and then you came back to this country and as that person, and then you had to go back to the immigration office, and they said, what is your name? And you say, my name is Eric Ngalle. So you were back to who you really are. And it was at the end of the book, I just said, oh, wow. I mean, I think this name for the book was just perfect, because it was like, you got back your name. So now I know that was not good.
but thank you for that addition. Thank you for that addition. But this is the whole thing. As you cross this cross borders, crossing seas, climbing mountains, seeking peace and finding none, you lose a lot of things. And one of those things that you lose is your name. Yes. So eventually, by the time I got to Wales, I was Osmili Manjola Tamvani from Bulawayo, And even at Heathrow, when they called me that name at Heathrow, in fact, they could have sent me to Zimbabwe, because I forgot it was my name.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yes. But this is the whole irony of it all. So if you fast forward it to 17 years later, after everything has been said and done, and even after I had spoken to my mom without giving her the full fact of what happened, and I went back to the airport in Douala and I met her, she was almost dressed the same as she was in 1997. She didn't call me Eric Ngalle Charles, she called me Oscar. So this whole issue of names, so I had completely transformed from the child that she knew into becoming my father.
Yeah. So that's how she saw you.
Yes.
Yeah. I get it. So that was interesting. That was very interesting to know that, I was thinking, I was interpreting it differently. So another thing I would like to know is the process of writing this, because I'm sure that it was not easy. It wasn't easy to read. So I don't know how.
again, I'll just go
remembered
back.
all this in detail. I know that there are people who really have very good retentive memories, but it was so detailed. Like, I'm like, this happened 17 years ago. And yeah, so how did that, how was the process? How long did it take? How did you
Well, like I said, I knew the facts of the story. I knew what happened in Cameroon. I knew what happened in Russia. But I knew that if I wanted to write this story as it is, A, B, A, B, A, B, A, B, it would be boring. It would put the reader to sleep. Yes. So I had to, one of my favorite writers, contemporary writers at the moment, apart from Chigozie Obioma, is Ngugi Wa Thiong'o. And like Yejide said, Ngugi inculcates a lot of humor in his writing. So as much as I had all the facts of everything that happened in Russia, I also had to go back to the memories of Cameroon, because this is what essentially what kept me alive. The memory of Cameroon vis-a-vis what was happening in Russia. But the first time I knew that I had to record this was in 1998, when I had the first attempt to leave Russia after the incident in Babushkinskaya. When I had been badly beaten, I managed to escape. I caught the train and I ended up at Sheremetyevo. And then the hostess tells me that they cannot allow me to travel because I'm so sick. That train will be, the plane will be grounded. And I pleaded with her. And I knew that there were henchmen looking for me in Russia. So I decided to go to the British Chamber of Commerce, which is in Kievskaya. And I went there and I recorded this story. But then I was already a Zimbabwean. So I had to give this story to this lady as a Zimbabwean. So that was the first time I knew two things were going to happen. I was never going to make it out of Russia alive. I was going to be killed in Russia. But that there was this little thing that if somebody was looking for, So that was the first time I wrote this thing down. And then when I came here then, I knew I had to tell this story. You know, the book is such a book that I could not run away from it. It will come back, it will have come back and bite me in the buttocks or something. Yes. So I had to write it and get it out of my system. Yes. So that was it. I had all the memories of what happened, but I wanted to make this book something that the public will consume it, not something that I sit by the fire and recount it to my friends or to my mother. I want to make it a universal statement. So I had to adapt, look at how other writers have written. So Ngugi Wa Thiong'o's book, Dreams in Time of War, I read it and I saw how he balanced the Mau Mau movement in Kenya vis-a-vis his own colonial education and how he balanced these two worlds together. And so that was the thing, when all the facts of the stories were already there.
Yeah, I really liked the fact that you had to go back to Cameroon, you know, to give a backstory of, you know, your name and how, you know, your father's family and what it meant to you and why it was important that, you know, you left, you know, all that was important. And also there were funny parts, especially I found the part that I think you were beaten up. You were supposed to be in a fight and then you lost. And it was just how you were so ashamed and then you kept on trying to escape, walking through the village and all that. That was really hilarious. I know that, I mean, it wasn't funny at the time, but reading it was funny.
You know, this is the thing that we always go back to our heroes, Nigerian writers. You know, I thought I was Amma Lindsay, the cat whose back never touched the ground. You know, I could fight anyone when it comes to traditional wrestling, and this was so. Imagine my grandfather was there, my mother was there. My mother is doing all the rumelele, thanking the gods of heavens for giving him such a wonderful son. The girl that I had a crush on, Gemma, was there. And then this guy destroyed me within 1 minute.
It was so quick.
I had my Moses moment with when he opened the Red Sea. You know, everybody just parted ways. Like, we don't want to see this book anymore. Seriously. Yes. And I didn't realize I painted my face charcoal black and the taxi driver saw me. But yeah, these are the type of things that motivates you to write, and these are the kind of memories. So I can do a fictional book now on just that wrestling situation and the empty chair. So yeah, I had to balance it with that sense of hope vis-a-vis despair, laughter vis-a-vis tragedy, and that is when I started the book, I had to put the reader at ease to tell them that, okay, I'm writing this book from a place of total comfort.
Yeah. That was comforting. So while going through all the harrowing experience you went through, it was, I give Eric a break now and go back to Yejide. So Yejide, this is now where me and you have serious talk. Why did you decide to end this story the way you did? I'm asking this because there was like an example in the story. I don't want to give spoilers just in case there are people who haven't read the book, but something like that already happened in the story to somebody else. So the way it ended for Eziafa and Zina, hoping that it wouldn't end that way, that something different would happen. Why did you choose to end it that way? Is it because, okay, no, let me wait. Let me hear from you.
That was how the story ended.
I don't like it when authors say that, because
but that is the truth, right? It like is like the characters have their own voice and decide where they want to go with it. And so that was how the story ended. I knew people were going to be, but that was just how. And even like with my first book, we wanted to see more. But I'm just saying that's where it ended. And it would have been, good to have maybe an alternative ending or a happier ending. But truly, life isn't like all roses and things just don't end. Like a pretty bow. Things don't end with a pretty bow, and that was how.
I mean,
Oh, you're muted.
oh, sorry. I was trying to not to add to the background noise.
Yes.
So I was hoping that, I don't know, sometimes you read a book and you want to believe that, you want to have space to imagine, like your other book, your novel. I was trying to say that, sometimes you want to imagine, okay, at the end of the story, you want to have your imaginations, because in as much as you're reading somebody else's imagination, while reading the book, I had my own imaginations of how Eziafa is and how Zina was, hoping that it would be different. But yeah, I get it. And I also get the fact that, or I was thinking that, okay, she probably ended it this way because this is actually how it usually ends. Not because you hope that something will be different or someone will escape or something like that. This is, I felt the story was just saying, like, you guys don't stop doing this because this is how it ends 90% of the time. So that was what I was thinking. And I just wanted to know, like, why did she end it this way? Why didn't she, like, since we already knew that this had happened to someone and it had happened to other people, maybe Zina was going to get lucky or something, but well, she didn't. So I guess it is what it is. I was going to ask how long you wrote the book, but you already told us it took you a long time. But I also want to know from you what beliefs, or what not beliefs, but what message or messages, what are the core messages you want this book to you want people to get from your story? What are the core messages? I have the messages I got. Maybe some of them were not even, what you put out there or you thought you were putting out there, but
So, okay. So going back to how long it took me to write the book. So when I actually started the book in 2010, it was this, I ended up with this manuscript that was like 100 and something thousand. And so it was going everywhere, going nowhere. And so that manuscript, I actually broke it down into 3 books. So my novella, Chasing Butterflies, was the first book. This was the second book. There's a third book that came from this. So and the third book is all done, and so I'm trying to shop it right now, and and so really it was a very, so I don't think I had a lesson in mind. Like, I don't say, okay, I would write this and this is what I want people to take, because really my first audience is myself.
Yeah.
When I write for myself first. And so it was more about me processing things and then think, okay, this was how, it processed for me. And then if you read it, because I'm always very careful, like, well, it's not a like prescriptive of this is how you should live your life or this is how you should go. So it's whatever lesson you find you want to take from it. Like for me, it was just like, I was processing that particular incident and this is how it ended. So I don't write with a lesson in mind. That is what I want readers to take away from it, because when I read books, I'm sure I take away something different from what the author intended. So it was just really, I was just processing. And it was, I remember when I was quite disappointed in the beginning when the book didn't get published. And in hindsight, in a way, I grew with the book, because the Yejide of me who said the book in 2010 was not the Yejide of me who sold the book in 2019. Right. So in a way, I was able to kind of also grow with the book in terms of as a writer, as a person. And so for me, that was in hindsight, I'm glad it wasn't published when I wanted it to be published. I'm glad. So that's so I don't think I have a particular lesson. It was just more, this is almost in a way that this is how it was, this is how it is. And hopefully if we read it and, we begin to imagine maybe we can have different endings for different people. Like, even though it ended this way for Zena, that doesn't have to end this way for other people. And perhaps when people read it, they can walk away with something, whether they live in, in the States or they're still back in Nigeria, or whether, they have a relative who comes to them and saying, oh, this is what I'm thinking of doing this. Maybe they can open more conversations and people can, not just that attraction of, oh, I'm going to live in the West. Right. So.
One of the things I wrote in my review of this book is that it would be a great pick for a book club, because I know that if I was in a book club and we had to have a conversation about this book, I would have a lot of things to say. But even if, I don't live in the West and I'm not in that position I'm not in position of either of the protagonists, either Zena, who was young, or Isiafa, who had been in the States and struggled and in that position of pressure. My hope is that people would read this book. I feel like it was an important story to tell from my own perspective. Is a very important story to tell. I don't think I have read this story. We hear about this thing happening, and not just the fact that it ends this way, but the fact that people think that it's okay to have the idea of I can get someone who I can mold into the kind of person I want. That is number one. Let's not even go into exactly what happened. Some people have that idea, but it's false, because people are people. They, even if at the point where you marry that young girl and you say, oh, this is somebody I can mold, that person grows and evolves and interacts with her environment, and change is the only constant thing in life. So she would change in some way, that would surprise you. And it's the same with this book, and especially mothers, like, we're all growing older, and I have kids, I have 3 kids, and learning from that experience of pressuring your kids to say, oh, you have to get married to someone from a village or from a part of the country or whatever it is. So I hope that people would be able to get that, because those were some of the things amongst others that I got out of the story. Another question is the relationship between Eziafa and interesting. It was, I think it was what drew me into the book. I loved her character. Why did you decide to create that character for him to, for him to have a relationship with that person before he made up his mind to go marry Zina?
I'm not like, like some questions you I don't know of that. Okay, why did I think I wanted to offer a view of what could have been, right? A path that he could have taken, but then he chose something else, right? So it was to offer a view of, okay, you could have gone this way, but you went this way instead, right? And so Jovita offered like a different, capture of what he could have been, and we got to see a different kind of Eziafa. We got to see him in a different, it was different with Jovita, right?
I liked him so much.
So he was
a cool guy.
He was different and so it just shows you sometimes that people are different with different people. Right? People show different parts of themselves. So somebody where somebody, like someone say, oh, this person was a very stern person, very straight person. And somebody say, oh, that person, that's my guy. Like when we're together, we're cracking jokes. We all have different facets to us. And we show different sides of ourselves to different people. And so it was more about what he could have been if he had allowed himself to just be. If he had allowed himself to say, hey, you know what, I'm a grown man and I can make my own decisions. And it's hard. I have to say that, our parents don't make it easy. I always remember I have 3 children, just like you, and my youngest is now 16. And I remember the older 2, when you're raising them, you're like, okay, don't do this because, and then they say, well, why did you tell me so? I said, because I said so. And they'd be like, okay. But my youngest, he's still the one who pushes, right? And he was 4. And I said, don't do something. And so I said, because I said so. He was like, but why did you say so? And I was like, oh, okay.
I have one like that.
I was like, okay, why did I say so? And it was about him not opening the front door and running out on the road. That was what this whole conversation was about. And I was like, because if you run out on the road, a car can come down and hit you. He said, but they will see me. And I was like, no, because the car is quite high and you're 4 years old and the driver may not. So I learned with him that you just don't tell children, don't do this, that you have to, especially some children, because he's still the one that would ask, but why, but this. And we're not raised that way. Most of us from my generation were raised with, when your parents say something, no matter how old you are, you say, okay, you follow through, right? So in terms of even being able to push back and question, like, yes, you're my parents and you love me and you have good plans, you want things to go well for me, but ultimately I get to live my life. And I need to have a say in it. Right. And so yes, as much as his mother wanted, ultimately, if he had said, hey, mom, this is not what I want for myself. Right. I want this path for myself. Maybe, he would take some time, some massaging, and then, but he didn't do that. So that relationship would show who he could have been, and not this, the stoic person who went back home and he had to be like, I'm a man and I have my way or the highway. But so that was, I think that was what Jovita provided, just a different facet of who Eziafa is.
Yes, and he didn't, well, in my opinion, he didn't try, although of course there was the angle, you put with the cultural, will I say, we don't marry these people, because there's always that in our culture, or our people don't marry these people because, they are slaves or they are this or that or that. So I guess he also felt, because I also empathized with his character, in as much as I hoped he would have a spine, for Christ's sake. But I understood that, okay, he felt this is like a no one, and most African children or adults who are getting married wouldn't want to get married without their parents' blessings, in quote, like, if your mother says, I'm not going to attend your wedding, or your father says, I'm not going to attend your wedding. So I think that he just knew, you know what, this is never going to work because of what my mother has said, you know. However, I wish that he had fought for it, or maybe somebody else, not just who they threw at you. But yeah, there were just so many interesting parts of the story that I felt like you brought into the story, and I was just saying, oh, this makes so much sense, and it's good that this is coming out in a story so that people can read it, and maybe it would trigger some conversations, some more conversations around culture and how would raise our children and put pressure on them and so on. So I'll go to Eric again. But before I do that, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box, and then we'll read it. We're almost done an hour, and I'm just trying to keep the time so that we don't stay too long in this session. So now, so Eric, the thing is, this trafficking thing, it's still happening. How do you feel about that? You know, when you read about it in the news and think back about your experience, how does that make you feel? And
thank you. You know, we cannot pretend that we come from societies where the state places such a burden on its citizens.
Yeah.
So when I left Cameroon in 1997, things were bad. When I went to Cameroon in 2017, things were worse. And you know, so young Cameroonians and young Africans, we see them every day dying, trying to cross the Mediterranean, chasing those gold and silvers that our forefathers sold for broken mirrors. It breaks my heart. It breaks my heart. You know, in Russia, a lot of Cameroonians died. A lot of Nigerians died. But how do you tell people that the white man's land is not paved with gold and silver? So I had to be audacious with this book, saying that, okay, I came out, but there are a lot of people who didn't.
Who didn't?
Yes, but again, this thing has to go back to our parents, because when I went back to Cameroon, I did something, I did it deliberately. Like I said, the Arts Council had awarded me a significant amount of cash. But going back to Cameroon, this is the first time after many years. So I deliberately asked my bank to lock my account, something like that, just to see how my family would behave. My brother comes, he's been drinking, and he comes and sits next to me and he goes, oh, Eric, so now that you're here, it means our mom is going to change her will. I'm like, after 17 years, you've not seen me, and this is the one thing. And then my sister's demeanor changes, because they'll ask you in pidgin. I say, oh boy, you don't come to your pocket floor. You know, what have you brought? And one thing that saved me is that before I went to Cameroon, I read the German translation of the Prodigal Son's Diary. In this German translation, in the German version of the Prodigal Son, the son goes back home loaded with money, but the family did not recognize him. So they took their son hostage, killed him, took his money. When they were cleaning him to bury him, they saw his family tattoo, and then they realized what they had done.
Oh, God.
Yes. So I deliberately left, I don't know, everybody's behaving strange. Everybody's behaving strange. Instead of asking, how did you survive? How did you manage to get back? The question they will always ask is, what have you brought?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is one of the reasons why you see a Cameroonian would go and prefer to wash cars in somewhere in southern Italy, Catania. I mean, those people are broke. That place is so broke. I would rather go and be a madman in Cameroon than to be a car window cleaner in Italy. But people keep doing this because of that shame. Like the question people will ask you, like, what did you bring? They don't care whether you were taken hostage or whether you started doing 419, buying and selling fake dollars, or how many times you were tortured to the point of death. These are not relevant issues. The question they ask you is, so, oh boy, what have you brought with you? And so this is the raison d'etre, this is the raison d'etre. So anyone who takes their time to read Ngalle, will realize that our society has not changed. And it goes back to this thing where, like you said, The president of Cameroon has been there since I was 2 years old or something, since 1980, since I was 4, since 1982.
Yeah.
And it was only recently during the 2018 presidential elections that he said, oh, I am standing as a candidate for change. Omo, you've been here since 4 years.
Titties.
you've not changed
That is
anything.
funny.
And this is it. So this is it. And there is nothing that we can do so far as we have this situation where people think that there's a greener pasture on the other side. There's a complete economic. People will cross the Mediterranean. Whether I would like to go and introduce crocodiles in the Mediterranean, or they'll sort out how they're going to convince these crocodiles. It's a state of despair. And my story is just one success story. Most of it ends up in a tragedy.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, that's the connection between your story and Yejide's story, because Eziafa had a first class in computer science. Yejide, he had a first class, and then he was working in a factory in Minnesota for years. And he even had his fingers cut off and all that, and ended up in Houston as a taxi driver. And I mean, it's that in itself is already disheartening, because you know how like your you know, when we're in school, in university, like you're the top of your class, everyone is coming to say, oh, how did you solve this? You know, how do you come from that height and then go work in a factory? And you know, because you're educated, because I mean, at the time, you know, if I'm looking at the time Eziafa went to school in Nigeria, looking at timelines, the educational system wasn't as bad as it is now. It was good education. So he got good education, he got good exposure, and you're going to a society to do this, and then your family have this expectation that you should be sending money, and that was what he was doing. So he couldn't even move on with his life. He couldn't marry, couldn't do anything. So it is what it is. You know, it is where we are now, and this is, I hope, the beauty of books. You know, one of the things I love to do is, you know, make people love reading, to get people to read, especially young people, because if they read these stories, maybe we hope that they would kind of help them to think and, you know, change their minds if they have these ideas that, you know, going to the Western world. I mean, people have gone to the, I mean, if you're going, you know, as someone who is getting a job or going to school or doing something that is legit, that's fine. I even have a personal story, not personal to me, but I have this colleague who used to share office, and he had this childhood friend who couldn't get a job. You know, he of course, I mean, he had a good grade, studied engineering, but he couldn't get a job. So he called my colleague one day, and then he says, oh, you know, I need money for a flight ticket. And my colleague was like, where are you going? And he said, oh, I'm going to Malaysia. Apparently they're Igbo, and then in their village, there's this man who everyone knows he's basically into drug trafficking and things like that, but he's very rich. And my colleague was saying, nobody cares in the village. You know, when the guy comes and he's giving people money, he comes maybe during Christmas, mothers literally beg him to take their sons, but they know that this is what he's doing. And I hope I'm still on.
Yes, you are.
Okay. And many of them, I think I thought I froze. And many of them, you know, haven't come back. You know, some of them go and he can't account for them. You know, they say, where's my son? And, you know, he was caught and, you know, they killed them there. And this guy is telling my colleague, you know, you know, this guy has, you know, done everything for me. He's done my papers. And I was there when he was having, he had to put it on speaker, and he was like, you know what you're going to do, right? And the first thing he said that really hit me was, I've decided to sacrifice myself for my family. And I'm like, how do we get to this point where we are now Jesus Christ? Like you just have decided that, look, this is what I'm going to do. You know, so when he got off the call, he was like, BI, what do I do? Like, do I send him, now I'm working in an oil company and it seems like I have money, and he's like, I don't want to help him, but I know what he's going to do. And I don't want to have that on me that I, helped him to go and die in case he doesn't survive, so, but in the end, I didn't ask him if he actually gave him the money or not. So, I mean, this happened like a few years ago. So it's just disheartening that we are in this kind of society where we got to the point where people just don't care. Like, you know what, if I perish, I perish. If I get there, if it works, if it doesn't work. And I'm hoping that the stories that we're telling and would encourage them to just hold on, or to, and I don't know, it's easy for me to say from, that's what people would say. It's easy for you to say from where you're sitting, you have a job and you have a family and all that, and I don't, and I've been looking for a job. So yeah, we just hope for the best. I have been waiting for questions. Go ahead, please.
No, and I think it is important for writers like Yejide and I to keep going back home, because I go to Cameroon at least twice a year now, and
okay.
we run a facility where I take Welsh writers back to Cameroon, and I bring Cameroonian writers back to Wales. So we have this kind of network that we are sensitizing people that listen. It is not all, this is those days of those colonial weaves and those dreams. This is not how things are. If you are determined, serious, focused, it might take you 15 years before you make it. And by this time, your memory is trapped by those 3 stones in your mother's fireside. But your uncle is dead, your sister is dead, you've never dug a grave in your life. So when you go home, everything becomes strange. So make the most in this your little place. See, heaven is where you were born. Like, I've stayed here for almost 22 years, but people still ask me, so, Eric, how did you get here? I've been here for, like, how long must you live in a place to become it? Yeah. So this is why we have to make these places good, so that the next generation don't follow our footsteps, our footprints. Maybe our personal chiefs kind of guided us, so we speak on their behalf, the younger generations now.
Yes, hopefully. Another question before I forget, Eric, did you know that you could learn languages very quickly? Because the speed at which you learned Russian was amazing. And that was also a great thing for you.
That is what saved me, to be honest with you. That is what saved me. But you see, the manner through which this Froy Vladimirovich came to my life, it was one of the most strangest of situations. Now, I'm sitting outside Hotel Jim Chuzna. I am hungry, and this guy comes with his Bible and he's telling me about the book of Daniel, with fat cows eating skinny cows. I'm like, oh, guy, are you mad? I'm so hungry that you're telling me about these situations. And Freud took me to his house in Olitsa Gribayedova. And this was the first time that I saw a person who was disabled driving a car. I mean, it was one of the most ugliest cars I've ever seen, the Zhiguli, but this is not the point of the story. Freud was actually a driver. So he drove me to his parents' house.
Yeah.
And we entered into an agreement that for $100 a month, which I knew I did not have, but he thought I had, he will be teaching me the Russian language. Yeah. The Russian language. So Freud invested his time teaching me the intricacies of the Russian language, and within 3 months. So by the time I came back to Stavropol, even though I was the most illegal of all the illegals in that hostel, I became their translator. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, that was, and then, I remember the question, because you were saying you read the German version. Was it in German, or did you learn German, or
no,
was it in English?
I did not. My friend is
It was a translated one.
My friend is the head of German translation at Swansea University. So he gave it to me, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, because I was thinking, okay, so he learned German too. Like, come on, I need some.
No, I'm a fluent
I
Russian.
need something to. Yeah, that was that was very interesting that you were able to learn the language, and there were people who had lived in Russia for so long and they still couldn't speak Russian at all. So I just feel like that was really good. So I will be rounding up, but let me look at the chats and see. Thank you, Oyema, for your comment and engaging conversation. Well done, moderator, and great job, authors. Thank you very much, Oyema, for your comments. Then for Eric, I admire and commend the courage to write this book. Weren't you afraid that some of the activities you embarked on to survive would come back to haunt you? Yeah. Some of them were really like,
you know, one of my favorite insect in the whole world is the stick insect. We call the stick insect molikili because it's so tiny. But every time you wake up in the morning and you go behind the kitchen and you see this giant Iroko tree, the stick insect is on the side of this tree trying to push it. You understand? Nobody ever stands to compliment the stick insect as to, Omo, why are you trying to push this tree? People just look at it and just assume.
yeah.
So I was placed in a situation in Russia where I had to become a molikili. Otherwise, death would have come for me very fast. Yes. When I met those three guys the three husbands from the apocalypse, this is what, if I had money, they would have taken it from me because I fell for their scam big time. Yes, how can you introduce some, how can you tell somebody that you have a money-making machine in the middle of the forest? Well, this is it. And so the language and meeting this Cameroonian and the Igbo guys kind of saved me. But if I had not invested my time in learning the language, I would have. And then you should also remember that in Russia, I had given up. I didn't really care what happened to me. So all the activities that I engaged in, if the consequences was death, I would have embraced and accepted death. Because what my father's family did to me back in Cameroon was something that I was developing a venom, a bile, you know. And I will be honest with you again, one thing, I was introduced to the poetry of the Black Russian writer, Alexandra Pushkin. And let him not be confused with Putin. Because in terms of the Ukraine crisis now, Putin's name is a taboo. So Alexander Pushkin, and there is a poem that he wrote, and it's called "I Had Loved You," and it goes something like, "Ya vas lubil, lubov еще быть может, в душе моя угасла не совсем." In this poem, this Black Russian writer was telling his family that I had loved you, and I can love you again because the love I have for you is something that flows within my bones, within my veins. So after I understood this, then slowly I started peeling that garment of an outcast that my father's family wore on me. But regardless of, if anything, if I had been killed in Russia, I would have embraced it because I had such a venom, such bad plans that I wanted to go and confront my father's family with. So even though Chimaka and Richard are saying that Ngalle is one man's journey crossing continents from Africa to Europe, I think I was trying to go back home because I wanted to go and do something to my father's family. But I had my own plans, the gods had theirs.
Yeah. Definitely. I mean, I totally agree. You know, reading your book, I could feel that your father's family kind of killed you while you were alive. So there was this thing like, you know, I'm already dead anyway to them. So even if I die now, like really die, it doesn't really matter. And then that whole money doubling thing, there was a time in Nigeria, it was really popular, you know. So, you know, it was also funny. It was funny, but it was funny in the sense that, like, as an adult, I know that, you know, all these people used to come and say, I knew of people would meet on the road and say, oh, you know, we could double your money. And then I knew of teenagers then, when I was a teenager, where they would meet these people and then they would literally go home and take monies from their parents or take gold or stuff and go back and give these people, and then they will find out that they were duped, you know. So it was also interesting. And also when I looked at the time, it was in the 90s. It was still about the same time this was going on. So it was amazing that this came up in this story and it was happening in Russia and people were buying into it. It just shows that we're all human beings, and we all want, like, most of us, not all of us, but most people want this get rich quick thing, and it's easy to just, and it didn't it amaze you that some of these men had businesses that were functioning? So why did they still want to put their money in, you know, the little that they were making with their hard work?
It is the risk factor that comes, or that is attached with selling drugs in Russia. The minimum sentence is 5 years. And depending on what you're carrying, so it moved from 5 to 20 years. I mean, even more recently, this Ekete American who was just smoking cannabis, they've given her 10 years. So imagine us, you know, people were selling cocaine. So it was an easy option, because this 419, you have one chance. You can move $100,000 in 1 day. So the risk associated with this, people would rather go for it. So you have this guy who was a renowned drug dealer will come and choose somebody who speaks Russian language to go and look for clientele. And it works, because the Russian people are gullible. If you tell a Russian person that, yeah, is American, or US dollar, they pay attention to you, the power of the dollar. And these are the techniques that we use. And I was thinking, okay, I did my first transaction, and within 12 hours, I was £1,000 rich. I'm like, okay, maybe maybe this is the way forward. And I had nothing to lose. You know, if these guys wanted me to go with them to Vladivostok, all I had was my bag. I remember the Igbo guy had stolen my jacket, so I didn't even have that jacket. So I could just pack my things, and I just go. So
that was so mean.
But the guy
was so mean, and it was funny because you saw him wearing your jacket, but you couldn't even tell him, "Oh, give me back my jacket," because you were scared.
That guy's hand was
it was crazy.
But those little moments, those little things, those are the things that kept us alive. Those are the things that kept us going, because you look back at it now and you know for a fact
it was horrible.
Alone. Yes, there were people, there was something bigger than you that was part of this journey.
Yeah, true. I agree. So Yejide, you said we're expecting something is cooking.
Well, so the third book
oven?
Yes, it's all written, it's being shopped around, and so I'm keeping my fingers, toes, hair strands, eyelashes, everything crossed. That, you know, it gets a good writing is a different kettle of fish. Publishing is a different kettle of fish, right? So then that's a business file.
Congratulations in advance.
Thank you. So yeah, so I'm hopeful, but I know for the next 4 years I'm going to be very busy. So I'm also telling myself, okay, you have to just you know, just pace yourself, because I'm going to do school and work at the same time. So I have a lot on my plate, but I'm really looking forward to it. So, and then I can always go back to Eric and he can share some of the wisdom.
I'll come over to you for you to share some of your wisdom.
I'm also looking forward to So Eric, we know that you're a poet, you're already like, so do you have anything coming, poetry or, fiction or?
I'm so glad Amara is here, because Amara and I, we are negotiating the second part of this Eric Ngalle. So I'm glad she's here, and I've got witnesses now. And in terms of poetry now, this came out. Can you see this? Homelands came out in April with Serene Books. So this is what is doing a tour at the moment. And I'm delving into the fiction for the first time. I've just been upgraded for my PhD, but this is the most bizarre thing, I assumed that I was a wonderful writer, that I could write, and I was like showing up amongst my friends. And in my upgrade, then my PhD supervisor, she complimented me, and then she goes, Master Eric, is it? You cannot be right. Like, how can you say we are seeing the world through the holes in your protagonist's short khaki trousers, and your protagonist is sitting on a flat stone? What are you talking about? So this is where I am. This is where I am. I'm loving it. I'm enjoying the new world. The PhD is a different ballgame, but I am learning about the craft in writing now. So yeah.
Okay, so I mean, I'm looking forward to, one thing I love about, I mean, your book is I've read Yejide's book before. I've read one of her books, so I was, when I saw a good name, Yejide, I said, okay, at least I've read one of her books before. I liked it, and but this is the first time, and it's a memoir, so I think I'm just going to go back. That's what I normally do. If I read something I like by an author, I go back and look for his or her other books or things that the person has written, to read it. So I'm looking forward to reading Yejide's book. We're waiting.
No pressure.
For it to find a home, and then yes, and then Eric, I'm going to go back to look for, because I write poetry too, but nothing published yet. So I'm going to read. I'm just going to go back. Just know I'm going to go back and probably or hopefully send you some reviews or send you some notes about what I think and all that, and maybe we would have an opportunity to have another conversation. I want to, it's 5:20, we've been here for quite a while, and I'm looking at the chat box. Abimbola says, interesting. Thank you, authors. Thank you, Bookville. I want to say thank you, especially to the authors for being here. Both of you are not in Nigeria, but you've taken your time to join this conversation. I really had a good time. I hope I was a good moderator and you enjoyed this session. I also want to thank everyone who joined. Yeah, I want to thank everyone who joined, and I hope that if you haven't read any of these books, go and buy them. The books are available at Bookville World. They're having the book fair the whole of this week. So please, if you're in Port Harcourt, try to get there and get these books and read them. If you want to have an idea or read a review, you can go to Goodreads. There are reviews there, and then you can check my page, Roving Bookworm NG. On Instagram, I have also reviews of both books, so that maybe the reviews would ginger you. Let me say the way Nigerians say, to ginger you to go read the books. Toby says it's been an amazing conversation so far. Thank you, Bookville. Thank you, Toby. Thank you, everyone, for joining, and have a splendid evening.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Right,
thank you.
Thank you, Bia. Amara, you will talk because you promised palm wine.
Thank you all for joining.
Thank you.
We have another conversation tomorrow at 4 p.m. Please join us via Zoom.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.